Bimal Patel is the Director of HCP Design, Planning and Management and also the President of CEPT. Bimal, thank you very much for speaking to us here on the sidelines of the IDFC Institute event and on Bloomberg Quint. The focus of your work has been urban planning. And you know, there was an interesting thing that you brought up that I wanted to point out to our audience, that the land cover of most Indian cities will at least double or triple over the next 3 to 4 decades. Effectively, that means our cities are going to get larger, probably more unmanageable, or newer satellite cities will spring around the core city in itself. How do you look at this in terms of both an opportunity and a challenge, and what it presents to both citizens and governments, you know, from the point of view of planning?
So I think you're right. We are urbanizing. Inevitably, our cities are going to grow, and we are going to basically India is going to has a lot of India's cities have still to be built. Cities will grow out in the periphery, and in the center of town, in already built up areas, they will get redeveloped. This is to be expected, and this is a process that happened in Europe and the United States in the 19th century when they were urbanizing, and this happens inevitably every country as it urbanizes. At this point of time, I mean, of course, it's a massive challenge to to deal with this process in an effective way. It's almost impossible, because you have in the beginning people moving into cities. They're very low incomes. The city's productivity is high, but there's just not enough money to solve all the problems that you have. You build infrastructure over a period of time as cities start creating wealth, and that wealth starts getting invested. So in that sense, it's very challenging phase for any society, right. That epochal transformation from agriculture to, it's very difficult. The world over, it has been challenging. So India shouldn't be singling itself out, and there's nothing exceptional about the problems we are having. You just have to read and you find. Now, the important thing is that there are many things, if done right at this stage of urbanization, we will be able to sort of reap the benefits of urbanization, and later on be able to build on our cities, and our cities become great big productive entities, and flourishing lives are possible in productive cities of this sort. So there are many important things that we need to do right now.
In your work, you've pointed out that setting aside land for a robust network of streets is possibly the most critical thing that any city or any development process needs to keep in mind. You also pointed out in your previous answer that there are many things that cities need to do, or state, local, city governments need to do. Starting with this, which is the street network, would you enumerate what you think are in priority those things?
Well, the key thing is to be able to build, for government, to be able to build the common infrastructure, right, that households and firms need to be able to productively sort of build their facilities and work in any city. So government plays an important coordination role and an important infrastructure provision role. Unless these two roles are effectively played, it becomes not possible for private actors to productively locate and work in cities. This is a big challenge, because when government needs to do this, it needs to do this, you need resources for it, and you need the right sort of incentives and the right way of doing planning. Now, the real problem with Indian cities, as they go about trying to sort of create orderly form of urbanization, the real challenge is that the planning methods that we use are from the command control mindset, right, of a few decades ago. The paradigm that urban planners operate with is one where they want to tell everybody what to do, instead of just providing a simple, robust framework of streets. What you will see in successful cities is that at early stage of development, what they have done is manage to leave open rights of ways for transportation and infrastructure provision that later on can be built upon. That's what most successful cities have done when they were at our stage of urbanization. So we are not managing to do that.
Yeah.
And to be able to do that, what we are going to have to do is to change the nature of planning we do. Okay. So we have Indian cities, all Indian cities have plans, but those plans are not followed. They are statutory plans that nobody follows. Now that's meaningless.
Can I ask you why nobody follows them? I mean, if plans are put down and if this is at least part of the approach for most bodies, then why isn't it happening?
So the plans are, while they might be technically right in the sort of infrastructure provisions that they make, they are not politically sensible plans. What they end up doing, I mean, in a nutshell, if I were to tell you, what the problem of earlier planning is, that planners create public benefits, and when public benefits are created, there are costs, and those costs are imposed unequally or on a few people, and the benefits accrue to other people. Yeah. This is a recipe for creating political problems, and your plan won't be implemented. So if you have a street, and if you're going to tell a guy, I'm going to take your land away and pay you compensation for it, and I'm going to take your land away through eminent domain or acquisition, this guy is going to look at his neighbor and wonder why his land needs to be given up, right? He's going to say, my neighbor's land is going to appreciate in value, my neighbor is going to benefit over a long period of time, I'm being thrown out of the land game. So this guy is now going to try to shift the road onto his neighbor, and the neighbor will try to shift it back, and the road never will get built. In a nutshell, this is what happens with all proposals that Indian planners make. Okay. So that's what it is.
Okay, what would you hold out as an example of a Western city, let's say, that has successfully deployed just this strategy you're talking about, which is don't get into the nitty-gritty of which space goes to whom. As a authority, just lay down the street network first and apportion enough land for it.
All European cities, all American cities in the 19th century did this. If you look at if you look at what happened in New York, when New York was a tiny bit of a city or town on the tip of Manhattan Island, they planned a grid of streets that stretched out miles into the hinterland, and they hung on to that street grid. They said, this is going to be a right of way, we don't know what's going to come on this, whether no cars, they didn't know anything about anything, they didn't know subways, etc. And this is going to be a street network, and we don't know what's going to come here, but this is the framework. The rest of the plots, we are flexible.
Developed over time.
They develop.
And they continue to.
And they continue
New York
to.
Is a constantly
every city is like this. Barcelona, you take, is the same story. Many, all the American cities for sure. But they built streets essentially.
Is there an Indian city that you would hold out as an example that has been able to deploy the same strategy, at least partly effectively, if not wholly?
Well, it's not because I come from Gujarat, but in Gujarat's planning system has been able to pull this trick off since years. So many Gujarat cities, if you look at their peripheries where the city is expanding out, they are simultaneously creating a grid of streets. And I don't have to say this, just go down to Google, look at all the maps, and now you can see them, you can see the satellite pictures, historical data, and see what's happening on the periphery. As the development comes up, a street network simultaneously comes up, and this is not because of spontaneous cooperation amongst all the landowners, but because there is a planning system that functions. Go to other cities in India, you will see that they are all failing miserably. Yes. They are sort of a haphazard sprawl going out into the countryside. So what is Gujarat doing right is something that a lot of other cities can learn from. And what Gujarat doing right is being done right since last 75 years. Okay, so it's not new. And at that time it was part of Maharashtra state, so it's not even a Gujarati invention. Right. And the Japanese have been doing this since the 19th century. The Germans also, they use this technique a lot.
But Bimal, if Gujarat can get it right, or erstwhile Maharashtra can get it right, if I can put it, or extended Maharashtra can get it right, why is it that present day Maharashtra can't get it right? I mean, you've got a living example of Mumbai.
Present day Maharashtra, they are really keen on reviving this system, because historically they know this system. Juhu scheme was, for example, developed in this manner. So it's a TP scheme, and in fact the first Ahmedabad schemes were done from Pune. The office of the planning office, the British planning office was in Pune.
Okay.
So it's not as if, so they have a historical, so they're trying to get the process going. But the reason why it's not going is, doesn't get easily adopted by any state is because there's a learning curve, there's a commitment that you got to make. The rewards of this system are going to come in 2 years, 2.5, 3 years down the line, because this is what the process takes to set up a plan, a statutory plan, take it through all the loopholes, etc., work with the people, all the time period that even the fastest that Gujarat does it would be a year and a half, but because they know how to do it. In our political system, the real problem is that the time frames that our politicians and our administrators operate with are very short. They want an answer that will work overnight. And so people are reluctant to put too much effort into the whole system and wait for the rewards for 2.5 years. Essentially, that is why I think it doesn't get adopted easily. But as it is becoming more and more clear that it's going to be impossible to use land acquisition to appropriate land for various public purposes, the interest in the Gujarat mechanism is increasing
or reviving.
And I'm certain next 5 years, already Andhra Pradesh is doing some bits with its new capital. Though it's not exactly the Gujarat system and it's not systematized in Andhra Pradesh. That's it's too one-off a attempt that is being made. Mumbai is, Maharashtra is trying to sort of revive it as a system. It will happen. I have no doubt about it.
I hope so. Mumbai has more than doubled in size, even from the time I was born, and we've seen incredible growth and incredibly poor planned growth, right? Yes. You see any hope for Mumbai? Do you see in your conversations with administrators the ability to now at least probably correct some of the excesses of the past, and any further expansion get done in a more planned way?
You see, the other part of my story is, one part of my story is new growth.
Yes.
What I love to talk about. It's easier to deal with. Yeah. But the thing is, cities don't get built once and for all. Even Mumbai is getting rebuilt as we speak. I mean, all of Parel, all of the Worli area, etc. It's getting rebuilt. That's a historic opportunity.
And it's being missed every day. I call Lower Parel Slower Parel. Yes. Because if you see how narrow the streets are and the number of real estate that's
the real problem in our country is that the whole discussion about urbanization deals with new growth and development of this sort of big buildings as a zero-sum game. If the builders get to build their big buildings, then the city loses. And the city gets, so it's always portrayed like that, and we got to get out of that. And that's the other part of what we're trying to pull off in Gujarat, where we start talking about redevelopment of a city, so that simultaneously you increase the amount of floor space in the city and the land in the public domain. So, planning ought to be achieving these sort of things. Turn it from a zero-sum game to something where everybody can win, and that is, that's.
So is Mumbai's only hope vertical growth at this point in time?
Well, every city in the world, once the land becomes very expensive, then the only way you can make property affordable is to distribute, to have less land per square foot of building, which means grow tall. That is why cities world over grow tall.
Okay. This is a complex issue of local governance, state governance and central governance, right? Are there any sort of policies, challenges, besides what you've already articulated to us, that you would like to talk about where you feel maybe the approach is changing from a state point of view? Or for instance, when you look at Prime Minister Modi's smart cities effort, now again, that's not just from a town planning point of view, but town planning is integral to being able to build that, right? Are you seeing that advance happen?
I think a lot of the central schemes have been focused too much on infrastructure building and too little on changing the paradigm of planning in the country. Now, of course, it's not the central government's job to do urban planning, it's the state government's job.
Right.
But I think central government can play a very constructive role in bringing about a paradigm shift in urban planning so that you do planning in a different sort of way. And I think there is there is movement in that direction, so that I think the MOUD is getting interested in figuring out how do we do something about urban planning. along with all the infrastructure that we are funding. How do we get them to see things a little, get cities and to see things a little differently?